Welcome to On the Chain. This is the Roundtable. I am Chip. That is my co-host Jeff. And tonight we have a very special guest with us, JP Thieriot. If I said that correctly, JP. Hopefully I was close somewhere. Thieriot, go ahead and correct me if I'm. So welcome to On the Thieriot. So welcome to On the Chain. We're going to get into a couple things with JP tonight. We're gonna discuss a couple of things that's been going on in the crypto space, especially in and around Uphold, what Uphold's been doing, and find out some new things that are upcoming. And it all starts right now.
Let's go.
And now, the Roundtable with Jeff and Chip on the Chain.
Right, welcome back.
Back. Here we are from our... So I wanted to get into a couple of things. I mean, there's been so much going on. I mean, like, what are some of the... 2021 is turning out to be some kind of year. Do you think it's more an extension of 2020, or are we starting to see a little bit of shifting into some other things?
Oh, is that a question for me? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah, question for you.
No, I think it's remarkable thus far. Is it a continuation of 2020? I think it'll end up being hopefully a lot. I don't know, more joyous and hopefully lighthearted than last year. Hopefully the themes will change. I think COVID is obviously going to attenuate. Whether that happens by July or not, I suppose, is in question. But I would like to think that by December of 2021, everything should hopefully be in hand. Insofar as crypto and the financial markets are concerned, it's been I don't know, insane January. I don't know how else to describe it. It was already interesting, and then with the Wall Street bets phenomena of the last whatever it's been week or so, it's taken on some pretty amazing dimensions.
Yeah. What do you think about that? I mean, as we kind of elaborate, this movement away from the big institution, the old guard, that's the typical manipulation within the markets. And now you're seeing, and it's interesting because if we're going to relate what just happened with the Wall Street bets and all of that versus crypto, we already have a lot of people that have pulled away from the traditional type of investing in stocks to be able to invest in crypto. And that was kind of the big movement. But now we're seeing an even further migration. Would you draw any kind of parallel or comparison between this phenomena with the Wall Street bets, trying to take the power back to the people, so to speak?
For sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it all accrues to crypto's benefit. It's interesting. My first response was, market manipulation, a bunch of folks doing, something that's a pretty down the middle no. But the more I started to pay attention to it and listen to the, Barstool Sports and Chamath Palihapitiya view of things, the more I think I've come around to this is a bunch of people, individuals, retail, who were operating off of public information and in a very open and transparent way, and determining to go after something that itself is pretty bloody shady, which is whatever it was, 130% short position on a stock that I suppose may or may not have triggered some sort of nostalgic vibe with this constituency, but then sort of again openly in the light of day deciding that they're going to go do something about it. It's actually pretty tremendous. And to me, why wouldn't that just be another market forces phenomenon, though it didn't exist before, that the market has to deal with? It's not necessarily manipulation. I think I think the motives for why people are doing it are to expose hypocrisies and sort of fissures in the legacy system. And of course, the way it looks like, I don't think we know yet, but the way it looks like the incumbents have responded, again, I don't know if this is what actually happened, but if the response was make Robinhood shut it down, collapse the thing so the hedge funds can cover their shorts, that's criminal, right? So you have something that's iffy, but the more you look at it, the more it seems like it was done in the light of day. Kind of maybe what's wrong with this? Why isn't it just again something else for the open and free market to factor in? In other words, geez, we're gonna short the hell out of this company. Let's hope that we don't run into this mob of retail, that it doesn't touch a chord with them, because that'll be something we'll have to reckon with in the market, a new force in the market. But the notion of making some calls, doing some stuff in the dark, forcing sales, stopping purchases, that seems pretty shady to me. So we'll have to see what the upshot of all of it is. But I don't know, what's the SEC going to do? Again, the first impulse is market manipulation bad, but when you realize it's public information and done in a public chat group, then I don't know. That seems like maybe it's something new, and that'll have to be dealt with in the future.
That's a good response. Out of curiosity, so we know you as the founder and the CEO of Uphold. Could you talk a little bit about your background and how you came to found Uphold and how that transpired? Like how did you get into digital assets, and how did that turn into Uphold?
Sure. So I went to college back east to Yale. All my buddies, went to the Wall Street firms and consulting firms and the like. I'd spent 8 years back east after I was born in Argentina. My moved to California. Divorce wasn't legal in Argentina, so my mother wanted a divorce, and we had to go to California to do that. When I was about 6, so more or less grew up in California. Then spent 8 years away, and after college, ended up deciding to go back to San Francisco, and couldn't have gotten more lucky. I wound up at an investment bank called Hambrecht & Quist, which was really the first technology investment bank. It was Bill Hambrecht's observation that this new type of company springing up in what is now Silicon Valley wasn't well served by the traditional investment banks from New York. So he formed this small specialty shop, and before I got there, they had done the IPOs for Genentech and Adobe and a bunch of other stalwarts. But at any rate, in 1991, it was, 120 people, maybe 150 people. By the time I left 10 years later, it was close to 2,000 people. Obviously, we had dominated the early internet IPO market, along with peers that sprung up slightly later, like Robertson Stevens and Montgomery Securities. And then all of us got bought out by huge East Coast banks. So spent 10 years in basically technology investment banking, had a front row seat, a very privileged view of early internet. And in the process of that, met the person that would ultimately be the co-founder of what was originally BitReserve, which turned into Uphold. He was a guy who had founded the first profitable company on the internet, created the first internet advertising association, developed the first web publishing engine, went on to be a co-founder of Salesforce, a guy who reasonably a book or two should be written about. Interesting personality. So there's been some sort of almost Greek myth ups and downs, but a very visionary person to say the least. At any rate, when all that blew up, when the internet blew up in 2000, and it looked like it was going to be a wasteland for a while, I took the opportunity to go back to Argentina, where I'd been again a long time in San Francisco, and certainly enjoying that business. But when things looked really, really dire in 2000, like none of this stuff is coming back anytime soon, it seemed an opportunity to go do something else that had been in the back of my mind, which is spend some time in the Argentine ranching agricultural context. And I caught that one almost as well as I caught the internet, in the sense that 2002 was the beginning of a long commodities boom, which ultimately ended up getting killed by the Kirchner's mismanagement in Argentina. But what started off as buying a ranch and some cattle, we ended up buying lots of ranches and ultimately having as many as 25,000 head of cattle, all in the context of a fund. We had American and foreign investors, and what we learned the hard way is that Argentina, unfortunately, has a hard time changing, and even though new regimes come in and you say, oh, this time it's different, let's make an investment, what ends up happening is that dollars go in, just never come out. And that started to happen with our LPs, and I was in the uncomfortable but interesting position of describing, I understand that your Price Waterhouse statement says you have $1 million in your account with us, and if you fly to Buenos Aires, I can give you a briefcase with $1 million cash in it, but if you want me to wire it to you, you're going to get $500,000. And wow. That doesn't enter the American mindset. It's like, what are you talking about? That can't be true. Well, talk to Price Waterhouse, talk to Equity Trust, talk to anybody you want. This is the nature of currency restriction that these people have put on. So come here, I'll give you cash. If you can't do that, I can't help you. Other than by giving you a massive haircut. And it's not me giving you the haircut, it's the government. So it was in desperation that we were looking for ways around these currency restrictions when I came upon Bitcoin. And of course, it was too nascent at that time. And I often think if one could go back in time, I would go back to that moment, because if I take all the fund's money and I'd put it in $8 Bitcoin, obviously, we'd all be extremely well off today. But that's how I came into Bitcoin and the general background in technology banking, and 10 years of technology, then sort of almost 10 years of agriculture, and now back to technology as a result of an experience, in a foreign agricultural venture.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the one thing that you brought up on how you discovered Bitcoin is exactly how I discovered Bitcoin as well. I did a lot of business down in South America, a lot of business in India, and I kept running into the exact same thing that you're running into, which was the resistance of the full transaction because of currency. And coming out of Latin America, like in Venezuela, it was a matter of the customers in Venezuela actually getting US dollars to begin with, which was difficult. But then, the currency exchange and that kept fluctuating. India was a big one. We had business put on hold multiple times because of currency changes during the process of getting the funds transferred, trying to get the bank wire and the LOCs and everything. All of a sudden you put business on hold for 3 months. And that's how I discovered Bitcoin as well. I said, this would be great, except it was way too early in the game and there wasn't infrastructure around it. But now you guys have really, started down this path as you've, with Uphold. It's really amazing to me, some of the technologies that you guys have been putting together that I think, a lot of investors within the digital asset space and the retail side, they kind of miss the point sometimes, with some of the technology, which is the making business easier. And one of the things that you guys have is that in and out, with the currency, easy exchange of currency. So if I have gold, I can, use that and buy something from you and you get dollars, and that whole transactional process. Is that something that, is that something that's fully up and running and you have businesses that are engaging with it right now?
Absolutely. I'd say the way you just very aptly described it is probably the one thing that differentiates us from all of our competitors, Coinbase or Revolut or Robinhood or whomever, is the fact that we provide this sort of platform for seamless conversion. And some of our best clients have very large ecosystems with, say, a native token that they need the constituents of that ecosystem to be able to easily translate into whatever currency it is they have to pay their rent, their bills, and employees in. So we started with the Brave browser now, I guess more than 4 years ago. We've been a very close partner of theirs. When we started with them, I think there were a couple of 100,000 users. They're now well over 20 million monthly active users. I'd say a double-digit percentage of our approaching 5 million users is probably Brave related. And we've gone on from there to do the same thing for Coil. We've started to help Interledger build out a lot of its functionality. And most recently, there was a really wonderful announcement that I think didn't get the attention it was due because of how frothy the crypto markets have been, which was this no action letter that the SEC wrote for IMVU. IMVU is the largest avatar-based virtual reality game, over 8 million monthly active users. Their in-game economy does 15 million transactions a month, and there's like 75,000 content creators within that ecosystem that make very good livings, like $10,000 or $20,000 a month, selling digital goods and services in the context of that game. So the permission by the SEC to take those in-game credits, convert it into a new token called V token, and have that V token become open loop, total game changer. And obviously it sets a precedent for every other in-game economy out there, of which there are probably a dozen that are bigger than real world economies, like Iceland. So super interesting market, and yes, we've gotten very good at supporting these ecosystems and their resident constituents.
I wanted to bring up, so what were your thoughts when you saw the end of last year, and we got a little bit of word of it, but the SEC v. Ripple complaint that was dropped right as Jay Clayton, who was the chairman of the SEC, was leaving, and there was a lot of transition going on. Well, what were your initial thoughts when you heard about it, when you read through it, and then you made some public statements?
Yeah, so this is a really fraught item, right? So first and foremost, we have a very large and very vocal and passionate XRP community, which you guys are a part of, and we feel like this is an important part of our user base, and so our first instinct will be to try to protect and delight that user base. Obviously, we're not going to violate the law in order to be able to do that. We're a compliant company. We spend millions of dollars on compliance and licenses and regulatory footprint. But whatever we can do, we'll try to do. And so when this came out, we went to our lawyers. We had our sort of lawyers reviewed by, not really reviewed, but there are other people within, say, the Uphold umbrella who are not our lawyers, but come from, let's call it a regulatory consulting background. So people who were, as an example, paid millions of dollars a month to help the U.S. government do the bank workouts in 2008. They certainly know what they're doing, and they applied their scrutiny over our lawyers, and they were satisfied. So it was like multiple layers of getting to a point where if you break it up into pieces, there are individuals that certainly at the surface would seem to have violated some basic tenets of fair market operations, acting on asymmetrical information or selectively disclosing. We make no comment on any of that, right? But if it's in your pursuit of disgorging those couple of individuals, you damage hundreds of thousands of individuals, economics. That would seem to be contrary to the mission statement of the SEC, the most important part, which is protecting consumers. And when you look at, XRP today, I read the complaint twice, and I still can't figure out. I think only because it's now been whatever it's been, 4 or 5 weeks. But I don't know that they're saying clearly that it's a security today. I think they're saying that at a moment in the past there were multiple violations of all different kinds, and again, most of them related to a couple of individuals, but very little of it would seem to have anything to do with people participating in a token that isn't just another token. It's sort of one of the original, call it big three. And if it's true for them, then what are the people at Filecoin, or even almost any project you can think of? It's going to put a pall on everything, right? So it's not just the XRP army; it's the significance of what happens or what the interpretations are thereon. And looked at from another dimension, one of the things we struggle with at Uphold is, again, we try really, really hard to be, by the book, KYC, AML, OFAC screening, this license, that license, all the time. And yet a lot of our competitors who are not US based run roughshod, right? Completely roughshod. And you're kind of sitting there, well, I hope somebody's going to hold these people to account at some point, because we're competing with them, right? So not only is this not helpful in that realm, but it actually is proactively destructive in saying this almost ensures that the U.S. is not going to be the home of Silicon Valley 2, the internet of money. It's going to go to Switzerland or Singapore or some other place that's more proactive about providing clarity. And that'd be a shame, because again, I do think that in a global context, that risk investing, venture capital, it's like the last great differentiator for the United States. It is by rights an American sort of a thing, and it remains such. And it'd be a shame to squander such a nice remaining edge. So anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a a lot of great points. With the U.S. not having that leading edge, and the U.S. has been dragging their feet a little bit with this within Congress. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce recently just put out a study on that specific topic, and kind of going into trying to give some clarity in terminology. Breaking down what is a security. What, is a digital asset as security? What are the, benefits of the payment space? But yet it still falls relatively, silent when it comes to, congressional understanding of the space. And then there's a little bit of confusion amongst the different agencies, the SEC, the OCC, FinCEN, and now you go to the Treasury. We see with Janet Yellen, she came in and initially was very negative against digital asset, and then over the weekend, she had an awakening, and then all of a sudden she's like, "Oh yeah, actually, it's probably very beneficial, but we're still, concerned about AML, KYC type stuff."
Sure.
But there's just this misunderstanding, and then even further, it'd be interesting. You brought up, like with the case, the SEC rules on KIC with the KIN token, and they, file their complaint that it's a security. They penalize them, saying that they sold an unregistered security, which was the KIN token. They have to pay a $5 million fine. They have a 3-year period where they have to let the SEC know that they have any type of sales. But yet the KIN token is still marketable within retail, so retail can still buy and sell it. And there was no requirement whatsoever from the SEC that they then registered KIN as a security. It was just like open-ended, and so it doesn't end. I mean, how do you work within those confines?
It's tough. It's really tough, and I think obviously the litmus test has been Howey, and Howey was what? I mean, was it the 30s or something? And
I think 1946.
Yeah, 46.
And it had to do with an orange orchard or some such, right?
It was down here in Florida. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Oranges. We love oranges down here.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know, just like we've seen something, very new and kind of intriguing with this Wall Street Bets stuff, long before Wall Street Bets, I would have thought that there would have been maybe some new things under the sun with the advent of crypto. And I suppose an analogy that I thought was pretty elegant and worked for me is the concept of a gold mine, right? And a gold mine can sell some of its gold, but it can also sell its stock, and nobody confuses its gold for its stock. Even if it is the company selling the gold, it doesn't make it the company's stock, right? So at any rate, it's odd, and I'm not a lawyer, and I do appreciate the folks that I regard as very, very good lawyers, because ultimately they're like scholars from the Name of the Rose or something. They're tremendous, and they go back and think of some precedent from whatever the 40s or the
sometimes
50s.
even further. Sometimes they go way back.
Maybe the 1700s. Nobody knows at this point. You got to go back to the founding, and because this is how ridiculous our law has been. I want to talk a little bit about Uphold was like with open arms about the spark, the airdrop that happened for XRP holders, and I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts about Flare? It's the technology, what are your thoughts about it coming into the ecosystem and the impact it potentially could have on the DeFi space?
Well, so first off, I've spoken with Hugo a couple of times, and he struck me as a very bright guy. Again, sort of before, I'm trying to remember, was it before? Yes. So we agreed. I think we were the first people to agree to be involved with the airdrop. But what I can't remember is, did it precede the XRP SEC conundrum? I think it did, right?
It did, yeah. It happened on the 12th. Yeah, it was right around that same time, though. It was like a week later, 10 days later, that they dropped the complaint.
Yeah, so it was close, but the answer would be the same. In other words, hey, is this something the XRP community is interested in? It is. Well, sure, then we're gonna support it. And I think we helped them get Bitsnap support, and so hopefully we more than did our part. I think the technology is super interesting. I think interoperability is interesting. I think they perceive the gaming space as a big opportunity. So in terms of, again, the couple of conversations we've had, they seem completely on point to me. Now, going beneath that and giving you any kind of assessment of their technology, that I've not had the time to do that. I think our guys are impressed with their technology. So yeah, looking forward to it rolling out.
Nice. And just so, what's one of the things that you could tell our viewers and let people know, maybe something they don't know about Uphold? Because it really, Uphold's pretty deep. It's not really, it's really more of a platform that engages in a lot of different things. And you have the Universal Protocol Alliance. You have some new tokens you're spinning up that I think we want to talk a little bit about. But what are some things that maybe somebody wouldn't quite know about Uphold?
Well, so two things come to mind. One, that we're really not pleased with our user experience, and we do suffer deeply when we piss people off. And a lot of, I think what pisses people off is, we have tried to be as frictionless as possible. And I think, as this industry moves forward at light speed, hopefully delivering or getting close to delivering more and more and more conveniences versus, the benchmark of the 200-year-old bank on the corner, the fraud and phishing and all that crap almost keeps pace. And it just gets more ingenious and more horrible, almost at the same pace of the advancement. So one thing that we just haven't figured our way around is this 65-day cooldown that we put on ACH. Now, I think other places just simply don't allow ACH into crypto. It's such a wide open fraud vector. The long tail risk goes on for those entire 65 days. That stuff is awful. And I think that people get confused or think we somehow profit from it or want to do it, or it's not the case. It's just, these are constraints that we're forced to operate within, and so I hope that this is the year that we finally break the back of a bunch of these things and just figure out how to deliver the benefits without having to artificially put on all the friction that renders so many of those benefits, incremental.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just kind of to dig into that a little bit, and it's a question I've asked, everybody we brought on the show, and just kind of an observation when it comes to the banking space and the friction created by things like ACH and others. But it's kind of this blending that we're seeing happen right now with the digital asset exchanges essentially becoming banks. Not everybody is yet, adopted banking licensing like Kraken in Wyoming, but they're already getting there. Like with Uphold, we could keep any currency we want on Uphold. It's essentially the role of a bank. I can put all my dollars on there. I can keep a digital asset on there. And you go even a little bit further because you can have gold and other things. And then the relationships with some of the exchanges also then offering interest and loans. And there's all these different variables that keep popping up. It seems like the exchanges are moving at a faster and faster rate. I mean, it's definitely exponential growth at this point, moving towards the new banking, of 20, of this period of time, versus the banks that seem to be a little bit stuck. And the only way they can really get into this space is by acquisition. But what are your thoughts? You think which one gets there first, and which one at this point has the advantage?
Well, you hit the nail exactly on the head, right? And so the banks aren't going to get there, and they're going to wait around and make acquisitions. That's totally correct. And so the question is it somebody coming at it from where we are? Is it somebody coming at it from the neobank side, from the fractional equities side, from the debit card side, which is interestingly, where a lot of our competitors have come from? And I guess, the way I view it is, as I've described before, I think if you put a line down a page and you have 5-party payment system legacy on one side and kind of crypto native on the other, Uphold is definitively crypto native. And so as a result, I think it is much easier for us. We just bought on December 31st, we closed on the acquisition of a card business in Europe. So we'll now be able to issue debit and credit cards throughout Europe and the UK. And it's relatively easy for us to do that. Whereas I think it's extremely hard for a debit card company to, become conversant in crypto in any kind of meaningful way. It's just the barriers are far, far higher. It's way more complex. I think the skill sets are more rarefied and probably too demanded at this point for anybody to follow that path in. So I'm liking where we sit relative to the other, let's call it fintech players, as opposed to incumbent banks. And I think we're all after the same thing, which is to say, banks were great at dealing with the financial needs of a household in the 1950s, which is very, very different from the financial needs of a 25-year-old technophile today, right? Who's probably earning BAT tokens, on the Brave browser while he's laying a bet on Polymarket, while he's collecting HNT token from his Helium device, while he's sending, crypto to his brother in Spain. All that requires digital value zipping around instantly, and there is no chance a bank is going to do that adeptly in the next 10 years.
Right. So just a follow up to that, to the block, which is what's the easiest mechanism right now today of moving money, legacy money over to the crypto space? Let's say if somebody wanted to just exist without banks right now, you want your paycheck to go in dollar form to, let's say, Uphold, and bypass the banking structure. Is that something that's
Was that my next question, man. That's it
This
right
is
there.
what makes it all possible. When you have this, whatever it is, 50 million points of sale in every ATM in the world, then you're free.
Free.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, and we know James Rule XRP tweeted a lot about the fact that he was using your card, going into a store, spending his crypto, and zipping through whatever store he was in, and he got a lot of flack for it because people are like, "Oh, you're going to become the Walmart pizza guy, like the equivalent of the pizza guy back there buying the Bitcoin." And he's like, "No, you don't understand. My compensation comes in the form of a digital asset. So now you've got somebody who's completely freedom. I tweet this a lot. The whole idea of centralized equals control and censorship. If you want true freedom, you've got to become decentralized. Everything has to become decentralized. And I think this is kind of where we're headed. We're kind of seeing I think you put out a tweet, something about the young barbarians are showing up at the old barbarians gate.
Yes.
Right? Very well put, because
I like that.
And they're revolting, man, and they're not taking it and he's sitting down anymore. And they're like, something seems stacked against us. We're trying to get a hold of this thing, right? It's starting to appear almost everywhere now in every form.
I agree with you. It's becoming more and more evident for sure. And to that point about the $3 million pizza, I think if you take it's a diagram I screwed around with, but take purchasing power is here, right? Like the line behind me. That's purchasing power over the ages, and gold is probably the only reasonable measure of that. And the little soundbite I've always liked about gold is it cost a Roman senator an ounce of gold to buy his toga. Today it costs about $1,800 for a London banker to buy his suit. That's purchasing power over the millennia, right? Whereas dollar, king of the fiats, I could buy a Kit Kat for a nickel when I was 5 years old. I think my kid's paying $2 for the same thing, and that's the best of the fiats, right? So if you have this line and it's gold, everything fiat is below that line, losing inflation every year. So dollars at the top minus, say, 2.5%. And if you go in a diagonal down here, I guess, at the very bottom is Zimbabwe, Argentina, Venezuela, where the impetus is spend this as fast as you can, because it's literally losing value by the minute, right? And so, the opposite of the $3 million pizza is, the thing you should have bought all the pizzas you could have, second one, because at hour two, you couldn't buy half that number of pizzas. So I think where Bitcoin has wound up, the instigator of this revolution is all the way at the other extreme. No, there, up this side, upper on my screen, is Bitcoin, which is interestingly gold, and yet it's not gold, because gold is inherently defensive. It's a hedge, and nobody thinks gold is going to moon. They think it's going to do better than the best of the fiats, particularly in a currency debasing, inflationary part of the cycle. But nobody has ever thought gold is going to moon. Whereas with Bitcoin, you kind of have that optionality. You think it's going to have a lot of the characteristics of gold, but I'm holding on to Bitcoin because I really think it can go from 30,000 to 100,000, right? Mm-hmm. So that's not the thing you are going to choose to spend on this. But the point is, before all of it, we came along, the only thing you had the option to spend on this was, whatever country you're from, and whether that's lucky or not for you, right? And maybe if your country was shitty enough, they had a dollar alternative, alongside it. But generally speaking, you had one choice. The point of this card is you can spend anything that Uphold covers. So I wouldn't recommend you go out and spend your Bitcoin. But on the other hand, I don't know, take the BAT token. BAT token is not intended to be a go to the moon thing. It's intended to be a two-way economy where publishers are getting paid, but they have to liquidate to pay their bills. So it's like a denationalized currency. It's got a finite supply. It doesn't have politicians. It doesn't have deficit spending. So maybe in relative terms, it's just maybe a little bit better than a dollar, than the nationalized currency. So yeah, so spend that. So the idea is just choice, but I don't think it's like all cryptos are moonshots, and so spending it is a $3 million pizza problem. That's not the case, right? There's a whole spectrum of where they should fall, and there's probably a Goldilocks zone in the middle that just has to be, doesn't have to be a moonshot, just has to be a little bit better than fiat. That's all.
What do you think about these companies, MicroStrategy's, and putting, companies like Square that have put parts of their balance sheet into Bitcoin, earlier? Do you think that's a good strategy moving forward? Is that something you guys would ever take a look at as far as, a potential hedge for the future potential?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I did an informal survey at the company. I think it was week before last. It was like, how many of you guys would take your salary in Bitcoin, and how many would take your salary in Bitcoin if you were getting a 5% raise? And the way that would work, of course, is if your salary was $30,000, and let's say we marked at a $30,000 Bitcoin, your salary's in Bitcoin. So if it goes to $100,000, congratulations, you just got a 300 and some odd % raise.
Right.
But if it goes to 10,000, you're screwed. Now immediately you realize, that's not good for retention, right? Because people will take a bet, and then if their salary goes too low, they're gone. So I'm not sure that today, we're exactly ready for that nature of a switch. But the second you start to get, say, Bitcoin denominated expenses at a company, then it's all the justification you need. Now, MicroStrategy's and these others, I forgot the name of the other one, but I believe it was in the Bitcoin mining business. They have, I think, more direct reasons to do it. If we were super, super, super cash flush, we would certainly do it. We haven't been that cash flush to have the luxury of being able to hold it outside of the things we need to have it in to cover, our costs. But I think it's a brilliant idea, and there's almost no question that that with all the increase in money supply that's been happening in unprecedented levels, that Bitcoin and gold and these other things are going to outperform significantly.
Yeah, that's a good. It's interesting to look at it, because one of the things that we're seeing is institutional money coming into the space. It's good and bad, as we've just seen, with this whole GameStop, Robinhood, et cetera thing. But I find that I just lost my train of thought. I started thinking about the GameStop.
I was thinking about the Kit Kat. I went back to that Kit Kat. I thought that sounded hilarious. Terrific. I mean,
yeah, there was a point to my madness on this. But here, let me just sidetrack a little bit, I guess. As we're looking at this, because I look at, cryptocurrency, digital assets, the exchanges as a way, as a safe place that people are going to eventually go, or at least a place that people are going to invest in, where we, have, up to this point, we've had some semblance of lack of government overreach, lack of, financial institution overreach. But now what we're seeing, within what just happened, we're seeing government reaction. Instead of being proactive, they're being reactive, and reactive is always bad, not always bad, but many times it ends up being bad, where it could create government overreach. And we're seeing statements now talking about market manipulation and all of that. I mean, what are your thoughts now as we're, moving towards some sort of regulatory clarity? Are you concerned about, the overzealousness of the political echelon, to overburden us with regulations, or, just provide regulatory clarity so we understand, the rules of the game?
Well, so I have to get caught up at the end. It's been a busy couple of days, but I have to get caught up. But I thought I did see today that that the SEC made a comment that sounded like the right one, which is to say they were going to look into, why trading would be halted on something that could end up damaging the little guy. Okay, great. That's what should be being looked at, and if that's going to be the takeaway, phenomenal. If it's Wall Street bets and these guys manipulated a market, that's the one that I think is really, 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 really tricky, because the second you do that, you're inviting scrutiny to all the hypocrisies and fissures in the legacy system. And how are you going to knock guys that were doing stuff on public information in the clear light of day? It's hard. I don't see how you do it. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but my first impulse is, wait a sec, you got guys doing stuff in smoky back rooms. How can you even short 130% of a company? That's not legal to begin with. And again, if you take a step back from all the excitement and bombast, maybe this is, again, just another market factor that short sellers are going to want to think about before they go out and sell short something that some constituency might find dear to them, or choose to make you an example of. I don't know.
Yeah. And if you're going to crush, let's say if you're going to crush a company, I mean, the bet was they were going to crush that company, right? Elon Musk put out a good tweet. He's like, you can't sell a house that you don't have. You can't sell a car that you don't have. But you can sell stock that you don't have. And I was like, that's a very good point. But it's like, wait, you can't do this over here, but in this area, we're okay. Right. You know what I mean? We're kind of giving you the okay to do it. And, you might see some regulation change because, I mean, what were they really betting? They were going to crush that company and pound it into the dirt. That was really the bet, right? And so the one guy one of the investors came out, I think September, October, said he thought it was undervalued. It could be roughly around $20. So it was around $6 at the time. That gets a little bit of press. They start looking under rocks and notice this giant short going on, right? So that's where you got the short squeeze come in. And as the market's going up, okay, maybe those guys started it, but they didn't finish it. The rest of the market said, this puppy's going, it got a little momentum, and then it started riding it up, and so you're right. I think that's a tricky sort of part, because where did it start? Where did it end? It was on a live forum, but to demonize by the people that went ahead and did this when it was all pretty much in the open, when they discovered the short. Short squeeze isn't something new. It happens all the time. It just hasn't happened on this level where you have to have a hedge fund go to another hedge fund to get bailed out, and that hedge fund's in trouble, right? It's like,
but my concern, JP, my concern is the impact on the digital asset space at this point. Do you think, because now as they look at it, one thing that we saw under Brian Brooks, from he was the acting comptroller of the currency before for the OCC, and one of the things they passed through was this kind of I forget what it's called. Let's call it the safe haven, or within the banking, that you can't, that a bank can't stop an industry from banking, and now they've frozen that. So that law or that rule or regulation that the OCC had passed through is now frozen, because they're now looking at it, and that impacts the crypto space. So basically, Bank of America could say, no, we're not going to work with you because you're a digital asset cryptocurrency company we don't agree with. And that's one of the things Brian Brooks opened up, was to allow that to happen. But now that's frozen. Now, if they start looking at things like this, are they going to then turn to and say, well, now all these retail people are going to pile into the crypto space. Maybe we should shine an even brighter light in that direction.
I don't know. I think the starting point isn't that Bank of America was merrily banking the industry and now they're going to go away. They haven't been. They haven't touched us with a 20-foot pole, right? So that's created the opportunity for the banks like the Cross Rivers and Silvergates and Evolves and Metropolitan Commercials, et cetera. Their big opportunity is banking where those big guys have been considerably more conservative. So the starting state isn't some flourishing world of happy banks It's something rather the opposite of that. So I don't know. I do say that these shenanigans happening in something like the equities market do probably reflect pretty well on crypto and blockchain and some of its, attributes, right? And I guess another comment that just occurred to me while we were talking, because I hadn't thought about it in a while, but maybe it's at play. I don't know. And that is, I hadn't really thought about short sellers since the Hambrecht and Quist days, where we were in the business of doing IPOs, and IPOs are entrepreneurial ideas that have met with some degree of initial success that are now having their coming out party, right? And it's sort of a celebration, and it's creative, and it's proactive, and sometimes people get ahead of themselves, and sometimes people make mistakes. And it's always struck me as weird that there's folks out there who will not only delight in your failure, but will actually try to invoke it, right? And I think just in general in life, it's so much easier to destroy things than to build them, that it doesn't strike me. I understand it's a Darwinistic and normal part of a market, and it should be there. But it should be there in the measure that it cleans out and filters the frauds and the liars and the bad actors, right? That it's a great mechanism for picking things over and doing that. But for like trying to cause things to go down, things that might be overheated. I mean, I love the fact that obviously the ultimate destroyer of shorts is Elon Musk, right? He is the vanquisher of all shorts, and I think he's like the most inspiring personality to emerge in the last decade. So it's fitting, right?
Yeah, he's like the new Steve Jobs. I mean, he's kind of like taking on that role of, it's so funny. Someone shared a tweet, I think it was from like late last year, and it was just one word, Doge. So it's like he's always in the middle of everything. He's always like that guy, sort of like, and then he says something and all of a sudden he gets fined. But, I love the carefree attitude. I love the idea that, there's no filter with him, and I always like somebody that can, and this is one of the things that I appreciated about what you did, is you came right out saying, look, there's two ways we're going to stop, working with XRP. If nobody's trading it anymore, that's not a viable business model for us. Or if it's deemed, a security, because that's not in the business right now, where we're in the business of selling securities. And I was like, yes, I was cheering you on, because finally somebody, we have a leader in this space steps up and says, I mean, you did more to look out for the XRP community than actually SEC. That's their job. And then what happened to the investors? Remember, we were trending 60, 65, 70. It filed, and Jeff and I joke a lot here, JP, that it's like, yeah, XRP is our favorite sort of ish stable coin. Even with all this turmoil, it kind of just bounces around and just settles in somewhere. It's amazing.
Sure. Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, the other thing I didn't mention earlier is obviously we've gotten to know some of the folks involved and understand the technology. And I mean, again, to the point of creativity and being proactive and honestly trying to do stuff in the world, Schwartz and Stefan Thomas, the original CTO, these are some of the most brilliant minds in payments, full stop. And the notion that, I don't know, they were trying to do stuff to game something or pull the wool over anybody's eyes. It's just not true, right? These are genuinely good people trying to build wonderful products. So anyway.
Well, it speaks loudly to what they're trying to do. They're trying to change the world, right? And you have something called SWIFT, which isn't so quick, doesn't really live up to its name. Maybe in 1974, but
right.
Not that I'm inferring that this could be political. But really, when you start decentralizing, this is one of the reasons that Jeff and I talk a lot about the CBDCs. I'd like to get your opinion on the CBDCs, because this is the government, central banks saying, you know what, we kind of like blockchain, except we want to make it private, except we want to centralize it. Whoa, that's kind of like that's not really what that's what central bankers do, but that's not what we're attempting to do in the space. Like, what are your thoughts about the CBDCs and now they're this embracing You see it everywhere, right? That's that almost every country now is talking about they got to have their CBDC released.
I mean, there's probably implications that I haven't thought of, but to me, again, in that sort of view where you throw all the new digital units of account and see where they are on that spectrum, what's their purpose? Are people holding it because they're for speculative purposes, or CBDCs they're just wherever the fiats reside. That's exactly where they reside. So there's nothing has moved their orientation in that grid becoming digital or not. A dollar is still going to go up and down with a dollar, whether it's the digital version or the existing version, which is also digital. But so I don't know. It seems like there's a bunch of private market players, one of which is super sketchy, can't get an audit, but doesn't seem to bother anybody. It's it grows
True.
without pause. I suppose it makes life tricky for the private sector equivalents. Who needs a private sector equivalent of a dollar when you can get one from the government itself, I suppose. And again, that I would imagine would open up a whole world of benefits I'm not thinking of, like paying your taxes and your tax refunds and all kinds of other stuff. One would have to meditate on that for days to think of all the implications. But it doesn't strike me as a big mover of things, one way or the other. And it strikes me as a logical progression. It would be very weird if 15 years from now this didn't happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it's basically just like you said, it's a digital representation of paper. So
Yeah.
for, one of the things that we've talked a lot about is that for a country to maintain their sovereignty, they have to maintain their sovereignty over their own currency. Without sovereignty over your own currency, then you have no sovereignty, essentially, which is one of the issues within the EU. I think that you're seeing a lot of pushback with different countries because they lost a bit of their sovereignty when they all blended into working with the euro. And then one of the reasons why the UK, England, never adopted the euro, and they wanted to keep the pound, for multiple reasons, economically, but primarily also because of the sovereign issue, that they would be giving something up. And so I think that that's a big part of the CBDCs, but there's, some misunderstandings within the community thinking that the CBDCs will remain somehow decentralized and will be built, into this space, whereas they're, very centralized. However, there are some, I guess, that are like in, where is it, in the Ukraine, they're trying to build on the Stellar Foundation. And, there's others that have done things that are similar. In Bermuda, they have the, what is the
Sand dollar.
the sand dollar, and Marshall Islands rolled something out. So I guess there's examples of both. But I guess, to your point, that idea of it would be strange if a country just gave up its currency. They don't have it, right?
It's happened. I mean, Argentina was dollarized through a currency board for ages. Estonia was as well. I mean, sovereignty is great unless you're a stumbling drunk of a country, in which case, thanks. You guys do the dollar better than we do, the peso. So, some regime comes in and says, let's stop the monetary games. We'll screw up other things, and it ends up creating untenable pressures that break the currency board, right? So they don't last. But it's a fascinating issue. It's governments have gotten used to seigniorage and the benefits of having a monopoly on the currency. Obviously, the United States has benefited greatly from the dollar being the world's reserve currency. But I think the foundations of these things are starting to tremble a little bit. Certainly, the central banking controls of the 90s, they don't work anymore. So I don't know. I don't know where it goes. I just know that the role of a Bitcoin as being a very important alternative within the set of possibilities is critical. A math-based currency that is a distributed automaton that no one government can crush. Its appeal is no longer just philosophical. Obviously, the second you get the micro strategies and others moving in, it tells you exactly how real it is. And obviously, COVID has accelerated greatly the crystallization of its attributes.
Yeah, well, JP, I really wanted Jeff and I really want to thank you for not only being real generous with your time, but coming on here, sharing what's on your mind, sharing what Uphold is up to. I mean, we had a lot more stuff. Really phenomenal conversation. And before we get out of here, just curious, do you have a favorite beverage? Like when you're kicking back, is there something you like to just kick back with? I don't know, maybe orange juice, scotch, beer. I mean, what's your favorite beverage?
My favorite beverage is it's a combination of scotch and beer. And interestingly, I won't drink beer if I don't have a scotch around, whereas I will drink scotch if I don't have a beer around. But it was something. I went on a trip to Korea and went out, and I had an amazing time in Korea. I don't recall ever being asked what I wanted to drink. It was just simply scotch poured into the bottom of a glass with beer poured in on top. With somebody then stirred an ice cube in it and presented it to you with two hands. And once you try that, it makes normal beer taste very boring. It's ruined me. Yeah.
No. What kind of scotch? We
there
do.
We go. What kind of scotch are we talking about?
I've been doing
it was like Valentine's. Again, you would just be sitting there on a table with like a bowl of fruit, and I just got used to it. It was great.
That's terrific. Yeah, Jeff and I came up with a concept. We said, how can we get some of the people to just send scotch to us, and we'll just try it on air, just like. And but we'll never talk about the scotch. We'll just every once in a while take a sip of it. And we'll say, by the way, we're drinking this, and then carry on the way we do with coffees. It's like we could all just, and we did do a whiskey stream once. That was debatable whether that worked or not.
Probably not. It's not the best idea.
I don't know if that was really the best idea. We've had better ideas, JP. But anyway, I wanted to give you the last word before we get out of here. And then Jeff, and then if you would stick around stick around one time, we'll do a quick wrap up.
Sure.
Sorry. Last word for you.
Last word. You have last word. That's give us something.
Well, I guess where we started, which is to say January, and just where we are, and I think you expressed it, Jeff, or maybe it was you, Chip, but I guess. What was it? Decades ago, it was, Occupy Wall Street and that kind of sort of, upheaval-y type thing. Obviously, we had this insurrection. I'd say the last 4 years were just kind of bizarre in general. So I don't know. I'm feeling that, much more optimistic. I think this dark chapter insofar as COVID will hopefully rapidly come behind us, and I'd like to think that, I don't know, there's some optimism, there's some hope, there's obviously some degree of a reset happening, and hopefully 2021 is the year that it happens, and I think there's a leading role for crypto and Bitcoin and young millennial kids deciding to point out hypocrisies and clubby things about the existing system, and doing it in this way, which is nonviolent, clever. I'm liking 2021 so far.
Well said. Yeah, they're waking up the world. Jeff, you got anything before we get out of here?
I don't know how I can end with that, but I do want to say that I appreciate, JP. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to spend the time with us, with our audience as well. I want to thank everybody for being here and spending your time with us as you do almost every evening as we stream here at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday through Thursdays. So I think that's
That's what I got.
I think
What
that's
about you,
it.
Chip?
I think that's perfectly well said. I'm thinking about that scotch and beer thing right now. It's like really,
Yep.
it's the weekend, Jeff, and I think it's a pretty good idea to figure this out. I mean, it might be a good time tonight to figure that out. But JP, hang out with us. We're gonna wrap up, and everybody have a great one. We'll see you on the next one.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.